Well, I did a video on my Oscar predictions as well as who I think should win out of the nominees. And I decided to do a video on who I think should have been nominated, where I go through all the different performances that I saw this past year and picked which ones that I thought were the best. That were snubbed of Oscars. I also excluded performances that were nominated for Golden Globes. I picked 10 supporting actress and 10 supporting actor performances and 15 leading actor and leading actress performances. I've also got a couple of the ensemble pieces that I liked this year, which were group efforts where three or more actors or actresses came together to make one movie. So starting off my best supporting actress list is Holly Hunter for The Big Sick. She did a really good job in this movie playing Zoe Kazan's mother. She and Kumail Nanjiani have some really good chemistry together, and she really added another sense of humanity to this already really good romantic comedy. I mentioned in my Oscar predictions of how three of the nominees in the Best Supporting Actress category were nominated for playing mothers, and I think Holly Hunter should have been easily been a fourth one. Uh, Glenn Close for The Girl with All the Gifts. Glenn Close plays a scientist at a facility researching zombie children in this zombie thriller. Another performance that I liked is Bria Vanitia of The Florida Project, playing a young mother who is constantly trying to take care of her daughter. She's doing the best she can to take care of her daughter in this motel community where they live and where the daughter doesn't know any life other than the one she has. Another performance is Naomi Ackie for Lady Macbeth. She plays kind of like the maid to the main character in the film. Um, she does a really good job in her role. She definitely does what a supporting character should. I think the only reason she doesn't make my top five is she just wasn't in quite enough of the movie. Another really good performance is Gina Davis in Marjorie Prime. This was a movie about a daughter who or about a mother and a daughter more so, who use computer programs that create holographic images of their loved ones, and we learn things about them as they talk and they develop. Gina Davis plays the daughter in the film, who, after her mother, played by Lois Smith, passes away, gets a Marjorie Prime of her own and laments on her own relationship with her now deceased mother. Another great performance was Melissa Leo in Novitiate, the nun drama. The movie depicts the upbringing that nuns go through on their way to become nuns, and Melissa Leo plays the very staunchly conservative, uh, uh, excuse me, what she's called, Reverend Mother. That's what she's called. She plays the very staunch Reverend Mother who is in charge of the convent and is constantly afraid of the gradually changing church affecting the way the nuns live. Tilda Swinton for Oakjo is another fantastic performance. Swinton uh, plays a head of corporation, a corporation head that works in meat processing, who has some very sinister attempts despite her innocent facade. Swinton is it's clearly a parody on the way that corporations might put up a kind and loving front, but deep down really have sinister intents. Bridget Everett for Patty Cakes is another choice on my list. Her She's a former rock star in the movie who is constantly putting her daughter down for her choices. She insists that her daughter, who wants to be a rap star, isn't talented, and constantly she's putting her down constantly. But then you really get to have this sense of love and affection for her by the end of the movie. Bella Heathcote for Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. This movie was about the how feminism and sex psychology and love came together to form what would later be to influence the creation of Wonder Woman. Bella Heathcote plays the student to Luke Evans' Professor Marston, who was one of his students and assisted him and his wife in their research. And they had a very bizarre kind of three people romance going on there. Also, and the last on my list is Tatiana Maslany for Stronger. Maslany offers a great deal of support to a movie about a fallen American who was injured during the Boston Marathon. She offers another tentpole to this movie. So my picks out of these 10, Easily my these were all really good performances, but if I pick the nominees for Best Supporting Actress out of these 10, they would have been Gina Davis for Marjorie Prime, Bridget Everett for Patty Cakes, Holly Hunter for The Big Sick, Tatiana Maslany for Stronger, and Bria Vanitia for The Florida Project. Those are my picks. So now we're moving on to Best Supporting Actor. Um, the first one on my list is John Lithgow for Beatriz at Dinner. John Lithgow is a typical conservative, right-wing businessman who loves shooting animals and making money. The movie was a satire on different political ideals for the Trump era. It was clearly a movie made for the Trump era. Another supporting performance, Austin Abrams in Brad's Status. This was another movie about people with conflicting ideals, mainly between the young and the old. Austin Abrams plays Ben Stiller's son in the movie, who is getting ready to go to college and is constantly being pressured by his father because of the way that he projects onto him. Another good supporting performance, Jason Sudeikis for Colossal. This movie was a satire on kind of on the mentality of 20-somethings and 30-somethings. Jason Sudeikis brings the kind of cynical humor that he's known for to the role, and really was a good supporting character in the movie. Alex Sekaranu for God's Own Country is another one. This was a movie that was kind of in the spirit of a British version of Brokeback Mountain, the story of two sheep herders, the gay love story between two sheep herders. Sekaranu gives a really good performance in this. It's not so much about him, and that's why I put him as a supporting role, because it's more about Josh O'Connor's character, who and how he's affected by all this. And Sekaranu plays the character who affects him. Barry Keoghan for The Killing of a Sacred Deer is also on my list. He's the devil in disguise, absolutely. He's this very strange little kid who is obsessed with this doctor, played by Colin Farrell, and ends up telling him that his family is going to die. And he plays this role so straightforward and like innocent. Dustin Hoffman for The Meyerowitz Stories. This was a movie that reminded me a lot of The Royal Tenenbaums, but instead of a movie about children coming together and being about the relationship with their father, it's about children coming to their father and focusing on the relationship between the siblings. And Dustin Hoffman really plays the central role in this as the artist father that brings Adam Sandler and Ben Stiller and Elizabeth Marvel back together for his art gallery. Garrett Hedlund and Jason Mitchell I put on here for a tie for Mudbound. Mudbound I almost put as an ensemble piece, but Mary J. Blige was already nominated for an Oscar for her role in the film. So I picked Garrett Hedlund and Jason Mitchell, who have a friendship in the movie, a white man and a black man, during this time period where racial divide is so prominent, and they added a really good sense of humanity to the movie. Bob Odenkirk for The Post is also on my list. He plays Ben Bagdikian, who got much of the information that led to the publishing of the Pentagon Papers in The Post. Another great performance on here is Doug Jones for The Shape of Water. He did pretty much the exact same thing Sally Hawkins had to do for her role in the film. He's doing it underneath all this makeup and prosthetics. And I think he was easily a major snub this year at the Academy Awards. He should have easily gotten a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Lastly on my list is another performance that I think very much went underappreciated. Mark Hamill for Star Wars The Last Jedi. This is a role that we've seen him play before, but he does it easily his best here, because this is and it's easily portrayed the best, because here Luke Skywalker is being shown as this hero on the wane. He's slowly going out, and it was such a satisfying character arc that we saw in Last Jedi. So I thought he was a snub. So my picks out of these 10, I would say Mark Hamill for Star Wars The Last Jedi, Dustin Hoffman for The Meyerowitz Stories, Doug Jones for The Shape of Water, Bob Odenkirk for The Post, and Alex Sekaranu for God's Own Country. Best Leading Actress. Okay, these are where we get into the 15 considerations. Sorry, on my list, Salma Hayek for Beatriz at Dinner. She plays it very straightforward in this movie, and she plays this kind of almost hippie-ish sort of character who has these very conflicting ideals with John Lithgow's capitalist villain character of the movie. Anne Hathaway in Colossal. This was the same way. A character who is conflicting with the villain of the movie. The movie Colossal, if you didn't see it, was a really strange and different kind of movie, where Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis are, for 1 minute every day, if they stand in a sandbox, they turn into monsters that are on the entire other side of the world in South Korea. And she does a really good job in this dark comedy about mentality, about this 20-something-year-old mentality and 30-something-year-old mentality. Melanie Lynskey for I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. Frances McDormand's role in the dark satire Three Billboards was one of the most praised of the year, but I also really liked Melanie Lynskey for I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, which was also a dark satire on society. Aubrey Plaza for Ingrid Goes West. The thing I liked about Ingrid Goes West was this was a movie that looks at millennial culture. I hate that word millennial, but it looks at millennial culture not in a patronizing way or pandering way that something like Emoji Movie did. And Aubrey Plaza, who was one of my favorite actresses on Parks and Rec, does a really good job in this role. She's really fantastic. Florence Pugh for Lady Macbeth. This movie about a woman scorned is a revenge story of sorts, with who she goes on to kill her father-in-law and eventually her husband so that the stable boy who she's having an affair with can become man of the house. She's willing to do anything, even kill people for the man she loves. Lois Smith for Marjorie Prime was another great. At 86 years old, she gives one of the best performances of the year in this bizarre sci-fi character study. She spends much of the movie talking with a hologram of her husband as a young man, played by John Hamm, and we learn things about her past when she was young and how she was a violinist. This was a really human, different kind of science fiction movie. Sally Hawkins for Maudie. She's nominated for Shape of Water, of course, but I'm nominating her here for the movie Maudie, where she plays folk artist Maud Lewis, who made famous paintings, made famous folk paintings. Kate Mara for Megan Levy was another good performance. I wish we could nominate animals because I'd want to nominate the dog in that movie for a supporting role. Megan Levy was the true story of the relationship between a female soldier, and her bomb sniffing German Shepherd. It was a better version of that 2015 movie Max that was bullshit. Rachel Weisz for My Cousin Rachel. This was a mystery thriller about a man who believes that a former tutor of his wife has murdered him, and it's his cousin named Rachel, and he slowly begins, and he thinks that he believes she has sinister intent, but at the same time he starts falling in love with her, and Rachel Weisz is really good in it. Danielle McDonald for Patty Cakes. She's equally as good as Bridget Everett in this movie, playing this very feisty and fierce wannabe star who does have the talent to be a big rap star. Another great performance that I think was maybe the best of last year. And it was a very early film released last year. Cynthia Nixon for A Quiet Passion. Cynthia Nixon as Emily Dickinson was maybe the best performance I saw last year. The movie is kind of a very wry comedy, but it's also very tragic, focusing on the more tragic aspects of Dickinson's life. Gemma Arterton for Their Finest. This was a movie about filmmaking, and during World War II, it was the second best movie of last year, about Dunkirk, I think. And Gemma Arterton does a really good job in this movie that's not only about filmmaking, but also, I think, female empowerment. Lily Collins in To the Bone was another really good performance. This movie was used humor to convey the very heavy and often dark world of people suffering from anorexia nervosa, and Lily Collins does a really good job at balancing the humor with the seriousness. Gal Gadot for Wonder Woman. I've talked about in my reviews of Justice League and probably in other reviews of how much I really liked Gal Gadot's portrayal of Wonder Woman. She really does get the character right. She really does, and she really understands this character's ideals. And finally, Rosamund Pike for A United Kingdom. The United Kingdom was based on the real true story of the King of Botswana and his forbidden romance with a white English woman. Rosamund Pike does a really good job in this movie. Out of these 15, my 5 picks for Best Actress would be Lily Collins for To the Bone, Cynthia Nixon for A Quiet Passion, Aubrey Plaza, Ingrid Goes West, Florence Pugh, Lady Macbeth, and Lois Smith, Marjorie Prime. Now on to the final category, Best Leading Actor. First spot on my list is Harris Dickinson for Beach Rats. This movie is a much grimier and bleaker version of something like Call Me by Your Name, of a young man who is going through sexual awakening and isn't quite sure if he's gay or straight. Another really fantastic performance of the year is Kumail Nanjiani for The Big Sick. Nanjiani wrote the movie as well, and you can tell that it is written from experience. The movie deals with ideas like dealing with your parents of your spouse or lover, as well as like the movie also has this very strong thing of like Muslim identity, and you can tell these are things that are very personal to Nanjiani, and that's why they really do resonate on an emotional level. Another fantastic performance is Vince Vaughn in Brawl in Cell Block 99. Vince Vaughn, who I never would have thought been in a movie like this, plays a man who's out for blood to save his wife who's being held hostage by his former drug boss. Another good performance is Kyle Mooney in Brigsby Bear. This was one of those just very odd and bizarre movies that I really enjoyed. Just something that was completely original. John Cho for Columbus was another one. I mentioned in the review how I think John Cho is maybe one of the most underrated actors working today. If he's not playing Harold and Kumar or Star Trek, I think a lot of people don't ever talk about his movies. But this was a really good character study that he did a fantastic job in. Josh O'Connor for God's Own Country. I said I'd get to that one. This one is a lot like Brokeback Mountain, where he's this gay. Yeah, it's this gay love story set in the UK about 2 sheep herders, and Josh O'Connor. You see him as he is very much a lonely and almost self-loathing human being who, after meeting Sekarano's character, finally finds like a purpose in life. Robert Pattinson for Good Time. This movie was one of the this proved to me that Robert Pattinson was too good for those vampire movies. The movie takes place over the course of one night of him trying to get money to bail his mentally challenged brother out of prison. Another performance, and this one goes very similar to Mark Hamill's role in Star Wars. Hugh Jackman for Logan. This was a performance that was not appreciated enough. Much like Hamill, this is a character we've seen Jackman play before. It's also seeing the character finally reach the end of their character arc, and it's a character in decline. It's a hero in decline, just like seeing Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi. It's Wolverine in decline. Another great performance, the oldest nominee on my list and the only one that's posthumous, Harry Dean Stanton for Lucky. This existential comedy about a man reaching the end of his life as well was funny, it was touching, it was moving, and Harry Dean Stanton did a fantastic job in this movie, and it was so fitting that this was his last film. Another tie is Adam Sandler and Ben Stiller for The Meyerowitz Story, but what I also have to point out is Ben Stiller is also on my list for Brad's Status, so he's on here twice. These were both very similar movies. They were these kind of serio kind of comedies. Meyerowitz story is kind of similar about family, about the relationship between Sandler and Stiller's characters, while Brad Status was also about out his relationship with his son. Um, Another fantastic performance was Ross Lynch in My Friend Dahmer. Ross Lynch has to be the only former Disney star to go from Disney Channel to a movie about a serial killer, or at least until that Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie comes out. This movie is less about a serial killer and more about adolescence, and it really shows like how Dahmer kind of became and how he was influenced early in his life before becoming the serial killer that he would be known for. Tom Holland for Spider-Man Homecoming is another one on my list. I still think the best Spider-Man movie to date is Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. But if I had to pick my favorite Spider-Man, it's easily Tom Holland. He gets this high school kid character so right, and he's just lovable in the role. Jake Gyllenhaal for Stronger. This was another one of those crowd pleaser films. You feel the pain that this character has in this movie that could have been something sappy and cliche, and it wasn't. And Jake Gyllenhaal really makes you feel the pain of this character. David Oyelowo for A United Kingdom. He plays the king of Botswana who was almost forced to leave his country and hand the throne over to someone else just because he married a white woman. This movie had a lot of similarities to 2016's Loving. Bryan Cranston for Wakefield. This is a movie that was pretty much carried by just one performance because it pretty much is focusing on just one performance. Bryan Cranston plays this middle-aged father and husband who locks himself away in the attic. And his family just moves on without him because they look for him, they realize he's done gone missing, and he stays up there for so long that they eventually just move on. And it's all about his perceptions and how he's constantly perceiving the way the family is thinking about him. So out of these nominees, I would have to say that the 5 I would pick would be Hugh Jackman for Logan, Kumail Nanjiani for The Big Sick, Robert Pattinson for Good Time, Harry Dean Stanton, Lucky, and Vince Vaughn for Brawl and Cell Block 99. So yeah, those are my 5 picks for who I think should have been up for the 20 acting awards. Now I want to talk about my picks for best ensembles, which is something that I think the Academy should consider introducing because there are plenty of other awards that have an award for best ensemble pieces. One great ensemble was Alien Covenant. This was a big cast that included Billy Crudup, Carmen Ejogo, Danny McBride, among others. But also Michael Fassbender was also in the movie playing 2 roles. Another good ensemble was Detroit. This one was probably the biggest one on my list. It included John Boyega as a security guard who gets pulled into all this chaos happening at this hotel during the riots. Caitlin Denver and Hannah Murray play 2 white girls who were also pulled into it. Meanwhile, characters like Jacob Lattimore and Algie Smith among others, play a group of a doo-wop group. And Will Poulter being probably the biggest part of this movie, being the villainous police chief or police officer who's bent on interrogating these people in the most unethical way. Girls Trip that included Tiffany Haddish, Regina Hall, Queen Latifah, and Jada Pinkett Smith. I almost put Tiffany Haddish in my supporting actress picks. I almost did, but I decided to put her in the ensemble with the other 3 actresses because this really was a group effort comedy, and they all had some really funny pieces in it. Kong Skull Island, this movie was not only a homage to old-fashioned monster movies, but also classic American films like Apocalypse Now. John Goodman plays the person in charge of setting out this expedition to look for Kong. Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson, Thomas Mann, among others, are all part of the search. And the last ensemble on my list is the Little Hours cast. This movie is in the vein of the parody films of Mel Brooks and Woody Allen, and it's set in a medieval nun convent where a group of nuns played by Alison Brie, Kate Micucci, and Aubrey Plaza are all have their way of life thrown into disarray when a handsome young man played by Dave Franco shows up, who's on the run from his former boss played by Nick Offerman. Um, John C. Reilly is also in the movie as the head priest, and Molly Shannon plays one of the head nuns. Fred Armisen is also in it as, I think, like an archdeacon or a bishop. It was a really funny movie that I think revamped the dying art of parody. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll have my top 10 lists up sometime before the Oscars. So until next time, I'm Logan D. McCoy, and this is Real McCoy Reviews.